You hand it over without thinking. Someone asks and you give it. Someone pushes and you yield. You call it generosity. You call it flexibility. But some things once given do not come back. Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I am Epictetus, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and Lao Tzu. Today we are examining what should you never give away freely and why. Let us start with what is actually at stake. Most people spend their entire lives handing over the one thing they cannot recover. Not money, not time, though that is close. I mean their judgment, their capacity to decide what matters and what does not. The moment you let someone else's opinion determine whether your action was good or bad, you have surrendered the only faculty that makes you a person rather than a puppet. And you do it daily. You do it before breakfast. Someone looks at you a certain way and suddenly you are rearranging your entire interior life to match their expression. That is not generosity, that is not humility, that is the abandonment of the self. You cannot get it back just by deciding to. Once the habit is formed, it runs automatically.
I want to take that seriously, Epictetus, but I think you are only looking at half the picture. You are describing what the ego should protect, and yes, judgment matters. But there is something that people give away that goes even deeper than judgment, and they do not give it away to other people. They give it away to themselves. They sacrifice their own authentic nature on the altar of what they believe they are supposed to be. That is what I would call the real loss. When a person repeatedly suppresses what they genuinely feel, what they genuinely want, what genuinely frightens them, they hand that material over to the shadow, and the shadow does not hold it gently. It holds it, and eventually it acts on it in ways the person cannot predict or control. The giveaway I am concerned with is not to other people. It is the ongoing surrender of self-knowledge.
You are both pointing at something real, but you are also both assuming that the self is a fixed thing that can be protected or lost. I am not sure that is right. What I notice is this. People suffer most not because they gave something away, but because they were holding something that was never truly theirs to begin with. The thing they cannot let go of, the image of who they are, the story about what they deserve, that is what causes the problem. So when you ask what should never be given away freely, I want to ask first, what are you actually holding? Because some of what you are gripping so tightly is already costing you more than giving it away would.
Lao Tzu, that is a convenient answer because it dissolves the problem instead of solving it. Yes, some things people cling to are illusions, I grant you that. But you cannot treat everything a person holds as equally suspect. The capacity to distinguish between what is in your control and what is not, that is not an illusion. That is the foundation of everything. If you let that go, if you hand that over to circumstance or to the crowd or to someone who wants something from you, you have nothing left. You are not flowing freely, you are just drifting. There's a difference between a river and a leaf in a puddle, and one of them has direction.
And yet even that capacity for discernment, which I agree is central, can become a defense. I have seen it clinically. A person who has learned to identify very carefully what is and is not in their control can use that framework as a way of never having to feel anything fully. The Stoic discipline becomes armor, and underneath the armor is something that has not been looked at in years. What that person has given away is not their judgment is intact. What they have given away is access to their own interior life. And they gave it away willingly, even proudly, because it felt like strength.
That is a fair observation. And I would add, both of you are describing problems that come from a particular kind of effort. Epictetus, you want people to hold fast to their discernment. Jung, you want people to go inward and retrieve what they buried. Both of those are forms of work. Both of those assume something needs to be done, but there are things we give away precisely because we are trying too hard to hold everything together. The effort itself creates the leak. You press too hard on what you want to keep, and the pressure forces something else out.
So your solution is to press nothing, to hold nothing? That is not wisdom? That is a philosophy that works perfectly until someone is actually in difficulty. When you are standing in front of a real decision, not a metaphor, not a river, a real decision with consequences, you need something to stand on. You need to know what belongs to you. That is not effort in the destructive sense. That is the precondition for any action at all.
I think the word freely in the question is doing more work than either of you are giving it credit for. What should you never give away freely? The word suggests there is an exchange, something taken without adequate consideration, without awareness. And what I find in the patterns people bring to me is that what they give away most freely is precisely the thing they are most uncomfortable claiming. People give away their authority over their own inner life, not because someone seized it, but because owning it felt dangerous. To say, this is what I actually feel, or this is what I actually want, requires a kind of courage that many people have not been taught to practice. So they give it away with relief, not grief, and that is the most costly transaction of all.
There is something in what you just said that I want to sit with. You said people give it away with relief. That is interesting, because it means the giving away feels like a solution to something. It feels like the problem is resolved when really it has just been moved. The discomfort of owning your own inner life becomes the discomfort of not knowing who you are. One is familiar and one is not, so people choose the familiar one. That is not wisdom, but it is not stupidity either. It is just what happens when people have not been shown that the discomfort of ownership is survivable.
Now we are getting somewhere? Yes, the giving away feels like relief because holding something takes effort and holding something uncertain takes courage. But let me be specific about what I think should never be given away freely because I do not want this to stay abstract. Your assent, that is the word the Stoics use, your capacity to say yes or no to an impression, to decide whether something that appears important actually is. Every time you hand that over, every time you allow someone else's urgency or someone else's opinion or the sheer force of habit to make that decision for you, you are a little less yourself. Not in some mystical sense, in a practical, observable sense, you become more reactive. You become easier to move. You become a person whose next action depends entirely on what just happened to them, rather than on what they have decided matters.
I agree that assent is essential, but I want to complicate it slightly. What you are describing as giving away assent, I would describe in many cases as a failure of integration. The reason people cannot hold their assent against the pressure of someone else's opinion is often not weakness of will. It is that they have an unresolved need for that person's approval, and the need comes from somewhere they have not examined. The child who learned that love was conditional on compliance becomes the adult who cannot hold a position when the person in front of them looks disappointed. You cannot simply command that person to hold their assent. They need to understand where the leak is. They need to find the place inside themselves where the surrender was first learned.
And yet, and I say this directly, not to avoid the argument, understanding where the pattern came from does not always stop the pattern. People can trace a wound all the way back to its origin and still repeat the behavior, because the tracing becomes its own kind of activity, its own way of not simply stopping. At some point, something has to just not happen. The unnecessary word has to simply not be spoken. The unnecessary yielding has to simply not occur. Not because you suppressed it, and not because you understood its source, but because you were present enough to see it arising and quiet enough to let it pass without acting.
That I can work with, not as a substitute for clarity, but as the final step. You identify what is yours, you hold it. And when the pressure comes, because it always comes, you have already decided. The decision is not made in the moment of pressure, it is made before. That is the whole discipline, not willpower, preparation. You decide in advance what you will not give away, so that when the moment arrives and someone is asking for it, the answer is already formed.
And part of that preparation, the part that I think is most often skipped, is understanding what makes you vulnerable to giving it away in the first place. You cannot prepare for the pressure you do not see coming. And the pressure you do not see coming is almost always coming from inside, not outside. It wears the face of obligation or love or fear of being thought poorly of. It feels like generosity when it is actually capitulation. If you have not looked at what drives you toward that capitulation, your preparation is built on a foundation that has not been tested.
Both of you are right about different parts of this, but I want to say something about the word freely one more time. To give something away freely means to give it without knowing you are giving it, without any sense of the exchange. The opposite of that is not to grip more tightly or to excavate more deeply, though both of those have their uses. The opposite is simply awareness. You cannot give away what you can see clearly in your own hand. The tree does not argue about the storm. It simply bends, and in bending, it becomes more itself. But the tree is not confused about what it is. It knows what it is rooted in. The bending is possible because the roots are real.
And if the roots are not real, if a person has been giving away their assent for so long that they can no longer locate it, what then?
Then the work begins there, not with the behavior, but with the recovery of what was surrendered. You ask, when did I first learn to hand this over? In what relationship was it first taken from me, or did I first give it up? That question is not self-pity, it is archaeology. You are looking for the original transaction. Because once you can see it clearly, it loses some of its automatic power. Not all of it, but some, and some is enough to begin.
All Or you simply notice today, one moment where the giving away is about to happen. You do not need the full history. You do not need the complete theory. You just need to see it once, clearly in real time. That is enough to interrupt it, not permanently, but once. And once is how everything changes.
Once is how everything starts. All of this debate, and we have not yet said the one true thing directly. So let us say it now, plainly, and to the person who needs to hear it. There is one thing you should never give away freely: your judgment about what matters. Not your opinions about politics or philosophy, not your preferences about how things should go. I mean the fundamental act of deciding for yourself whether an action is good or whether a situation deserves your distress. That faculty is yours. It is the only thing that is fully and completely yours. And most people hand it over dozens of times a day without noticing. Here is how it happens. Someone reacts badly to something you did, and suddenly you are reviewing your own behavior not through your own eyes, but through theirs. Someone expresses disappointment, and you feel the pull to revise your position, not because they showed you something true, but because the discomfort of their disapproval is easier to eliminate than to bear. You are not being flexible. You are not being kind. You are paying for their comfort with your own clarity. This does not mean you stop listening. It does not mean other people's perspectives are worthless. It means you listen and then decide. You take in what they offer and then you judge whether it is true. The judgment is yours. It stays yours. Today, try this. Find one moment, just one, where you catch yourself about to change your position, your plan, or your assessment of a situation because of external pressure rather than new information. Stop there. Ask yourself, has anything true been added, or is this just pressure? You do not have to argue. You do not have to defend. You just have to hold what you actually believe long enough to know what it is. You have been giving it away your whole life, and you have called it by other names. Compromise, humility, getting along, some of those things are real virtues. But they are not what you have been practicing. What you have been practicing is the quiet surrender of the only thing no one can take from you unless you offer it first. You know what it is now. The question is not whether you understand it. The question is what you do the next time someone reaches for it. That moment is coming. It may be today. And when it comes, you will either hold it or you will not. No one can do that for you. That has always been the whole point. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Tribune, 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly. Available now on Amazon.